Hey everybody, Dr. Mike here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Adhikar case study that you completed. This discussion question 3 of this week. Discussion question 3 of week 3. So, I went and I read all of your responses to that question, and that question is particularly important because it indicates to me and perhaps to you how well you're understanding some of the elementary principles and practices of OD. So let's start there for a moment. OD is not about you or me or any OD practitioner coming in and telling an organization what to do. For example, you need to elect or appoint a new leader, or you need to do that. No, we don't. That's not what OD is. This is cardinal rule number 1. And that is OD practitioners do not tell organizations, they do not tell their clients, command their clients, or strongly recommend to their clients what to do in terms of running their organization. What OD practitioners do, however, when we're hired, is to come in, collect information, make sense of the information with the organization members themselves, and facilitate learning on the part of the organization so they decide what they need to do for themselves. So in the case of Adhikar forgiveness, many of you said that the leader should be, that it was a leadership issue. And I concur, it is a leadership issue because the leader is getting more interested and involved in Indian government, and he's not there as often. What was his name? Was Misha, I think it was? I've got my notes here. Mishra. Yeah, so Mr. Mishra. So, and I'll go through my notes here and tell you what I think of the situation. But most fundamental, because some of the remarks I've read it indicate, well, I know what they need to do, and they need to. And that's not what OD is, folks. OD is helping an organization help themselves. We do not come in and command. Now, how do we help them? It's through interventions. Actually, if you get theoretical about it, the very first phone call with a client is an intervention itself, because you are now starting to affect or be a part of an organization in some way. You can't tell it what to do, but it's certainly, you certainly are there having an impact on them. So that's number one. And the other thing is this question was set up, and I hope you noticed it, that the diagnostic questions, the data was presented back to you in the text according, and I'm looking at it right here, to the Weisborg 6-box model, which has been around for 50, 60 years, a long time. Purpose, relationships, leadership, structure, and so on. And those were, the data was categorized in those areas. So if I asked you to go do an OD data gathering or diagnosis of your own organization, and I alluded that to that for many of you in your DQ1, where I posted a question for you this week, how would you diagnose it? What would you do with the data? How would you feed it back? That we use a guideline, we use a model of how organizations work to structure our questions. So you could go in and do a diagnosis tomorrow about any company, theoretically, and say, okay, tell me about leadership. What's happening? Are you happy with leadership? What suggestions do you have? What changes could be made? Now, it's not saying that the changes are going to be made, but you're just diagnosing. You could ask questions about structure. The right people have power to do what they need to do. You could ask about relationships and so on, just like as we saw in the Adhikar case study. So many of you, I'm going to go through my notes here, many of you had comments similar to mine. The things that, as I read it, I'm going, yeah, I've seen this 100 times, very typical. It's a decentralized company, and they've got breakdowns in communication. They have structural problems where somebody is doing something and somebody else is trying to do the same thing. They're not talking to each other. That leads to conflict. They're not having as many meetings as they should. But between the coordinators, they're dropping into their own silos. Does that sound familiar? The relationships, yeah, many of you mentioned that they're not coordinating, they're not sharing information. The coordinator meetings are not attended very well. You've got coordinators all over the place in different locations. You saw the geographical chart there. You've got new coordinators, younger, new, highly energetic coordinators dealing with older, more experienced coordinators who see things differently, and not unlike what we're seeing with a lot of millennials still working with baby boomers in today's workplace. The new coordinators are not feeling welcomed. Well, can this be a serious problem? Well, sure, yeah. For those of you who replied, is the company in serious trouble? I'd say it's moderately serious. But there are some OD interventions that could probably remedy the situation. In terms of rewards, newer, more skilled employees are paid more. Can that be a problem? Of course it can. Some of them said that, well, we're afraid that the company is going to go out of business, or this group, this NGO is going to go out of business, this organization. They are having irregular reporting. Some of you mentioned that. Quite a few of you mentioned the leadership problem. Mishra wants to join, or has joined, an Indian government association or meeting. There's a leadership crisis. Who can take his place? Ms. Devi and Pia, Mishra's daughter, seem to be the most often cited. So we've got people who are cited but not interested. Devi doesn't have much vision and not forthcoming in her interview, and Pia, of course, is Mishra's daughter. So both women think the organization is not ready for female leadership. So what do you have here? I mean, you have an organization that is typical. First of all, there are no excellently run organizations out there. I've been in the business 30 plus years. I've not seen one yet. Why? Because human beings are in and of themselves imperfect. We make mistakes. So that's just our nature. It's not going to go away anytime soon. So if you think as a leader, whoever you are in the military, in the civilian world, as an OD person or just not an OD person, if you think that, well, I can come in and I know exactly what to do to change things and make it perfect, there's no such thing as perfection in organizations and how they work by the nature of humankind. So we just keep trying and trying and trying, and some are better run than others, and we know that. So the questions that came up in the for the question, and the questions that you had to answer. See, there they are. And I'm reading it from the book here. Based on the data provided in the case, what's your analysis of the situation? And most of you agreed that, Adhikar's got some issues and they need to take care of them. And for the data you read and my summary right there, is the organization in trouble? Interestingly, if they're bringing in enough money to keep their head above water, that's number one. All organizations are money is number one. And if you tell me that, oh no, people are number one, no, people are not number one. No. You can live in a shiny little box and think, well, every organization, people are number one. No, what's number one with every organization is cash, folks, because you can have money problems and fall off the vine. You can die with money problems. If you are having people problems, you can work those out. But number one is money. If you just don't have the money to run the shop's going to shut down. So, but they seem to be doing okay financially. There wasn't a lot of data around that, but it says are all the data presented just symptoms of an organization that is young and growing? And I would say, well, they are symptomatic of young and growing organizations. You've got new coordinators with old coordinators. You've got decentralized operations. You've got people that are both doing the same thing. So you've got some structural design problems, and you've got some then ensuing communication and task problems and so on. There's a great quote that I like from a fellow named David Nadler, who said, every organization is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. Every organization, the one you're in, whether it's military or not, is perfectly designed. That little unit that you're in, the squadron you're in, that small group that you're in, or the entire military, or if you're at USAA, every organization is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. So if it's getting good results, it's probably designed pretty well. And what do we mean by design? All of those little boxes in the Weisbord model, how the organization is designed. So if it's not getting good results, you could say, well, you have a design problem. Okay, maybe your leadership role isn't designed well. Maybe the structure and who does what and assignment of roles and responsibilities isn't designed well, or isn't working the way that you would expect it to be working. So that was the first question, and most of you agreed, yeah, there's some problems there. And I would say, well, yeah, and moderate. I don't think they're probably going to die tomorrow, but if left unattended, there could be some pretty significant issues. The second question, which was actually the third question in the book, but the second question says, what activities do you believe Adhikar organization should take? What problems do you think these actions would solve? Okay, so now, and only one or two people actually started discussing interventions. Okay, so can we tell Adhikar, well, go and get a new leader? Well, no, that's not necessarily what we're going to say. I would never say you need to fire your leader because he's now involved with the Indian government and find a new one. No, I would say, well, if you have a leader who's still in charge, probably the thing I would recommend is right up front some leadership coaching. I mean, if I was going to do anything, I would start with coaching the leader, this Mishra, I think his name was, and find out, all right, given who you are and where you are and your history and what's going on and what you want and your values and what's important to you and where you are in your life, what in the world do you want to do with this organization? Because he's got the money, the power, the influence to do it. So my take on things over the years, what I've learned a long time ago, was start with the leadership because they have the power and the money to make changes. And you can have all of the data gathering you want way down into the organization somewhere, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to make significant changes or see significant changes without help from the leader. So that would be the first. Well, I probably would start off with a recommendation. You know, if I came back and you didn't have to design an agenda for the feedback meeting, but I would come back and feed back the information just as many of you presented it and it was presented in the book. And I would say my recommendation is to start with leadership coaching and then use the leader to assemble a small group of people from throughout the organization to go back into the organization and gather more data, teach them how to diagnose themselves and gather more data regarding what changes should we make in each of those categories in the WISE board model by talking to the employees. There's 200 employees. That's a nice size organization. Talk to those employees and find out, what do you think we should do? What's happening? What would make your life better? And come back to that with that data. So send a small team. We call these design teams. So Mishra can put a handful of people together and off they go for 2 or 3 weeks gathering data and interviewing, and you come back and then you co-analyze that data with them. And from there, now you have enough information, you've gotten them involved, it starts to be collaborative. You can start to look at different interventions, of which there are many, and you're going to, as we read more in the book, you'll see there's many interventions. One of the most common interventions that I use is called an issue census, and it was sort of mentioned in the book, but an issue census is just getting people together and say, how happy are you? What's working around here? What could be improved around here? What are we good at doing around here? And so on. And how can we apply what we've been good at doing, those skills, to get us where we want to be? And the intervention then is first in the area of let's complete the diagnosis. Then you can come back and say, okay, we need team building, we need role clarification, we need restructuring, we need leadership development. We need a complete organizational overhaul to look at all of our policies and procedures and practices. But they have to come to those insights themselves. And what your role is to help them and to guide them and to educate them, but not command them. Sometimes the military people, and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody in this class, but over the years, I've noticed military people who, for probably good reason, and myself 30 years ago, would have said, just do this because I know it and I've got power and this is it and I'm the consultant and I know better. Fire your leader, get a new one, and communicate better. And you'll all be good. Yeah, it's far more complex than that. And all that does is indicate naivete on the part of me years ago when I would say, oh, I know what you need to do to be fixed. So getting back to this final question, I forgot what it said. What activities do you believe? Yeah, that's what I think. I think I would start. Number one activity is a long interview with Mishra, I mean the leader, to include probably a 2 or 3 week coaching session to help him get clear what it is he wants to do with this organization and then how to go about starting that, and probably to send teams, design teams or project teams into the organization to gather more data, called an issue census, and then bring that back for more specific action. Based on what's in this book, there's not enough for me anyway to say, oh, well, you need a very specific intervention. Some of you did mention, and importantly, what's coming our way as we move through the course are the different type of interventions, whether it's a human process intervention or a technostructural intervention and so on, the categories of interventions. And that's what we do in OD. It's pretty simple. We go into an organization, or perhaps we already worked there as a full-time internal OD person, but we gather information from the organization, from people in there. Basically trying to figure out what's working well, what's not working well, or if you like the appreciative inquiry approach, we don't even talk about what's not working and what's broken. We only talk about what is working and how we can take the skills and competencies that we've developed to create what is working to be working, and then to use those competencies and skills to get further along the path and get what we want in the future. More on that this week in week 4, or this is week 3, I guess next week, week 4. So that's it. So if you've answered those questions somewhat in line with what I've said, and you did answer the question fully, then you got credit for it. I want to point out though, if you did not see, if you got 0 credit, even though you think you posted an answer, it's real easy for me, as it is for any of us, to read the reply from somebody who didn't really thoroughly read the case, folks, and post a reply that really doesn't, it skirts the issue, it's not in depth, it's kind of esoteric, philosophical, opinion-based replies to the discussion questions on a case study. It's real easy to see if you either, if you don't understand it, or you can't reply to the question, or you just didn't want to and got a little lazy. I've seen that. So for some of you, there were either reduced or 0 points for simply not replying to the questions. Please take the time to reply to these discussion questions fully, and you'll do great. And especially if you're interested in the field of OD and want to do OD, then for gosh sakes, this is going to serve you well. So take the time, and as you can scan through everybody's posts just like I can, and you can see some of them are really good and really thorough, and you can see that the person has thought about it critically and done the reading and went back into the chapter. And then you can see other people just go, well, I got to get 150 words out of here, so blah, 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 blah. I'll look at somebody else's posts and I'll kind of piggyback on what they have to say. It's so obvious. It's so obvious to the folks who are doing really good work and those who are kind of not. Okay, so enough said about that. If you have fewer points, that's why. And there's still plenty of time in the course to pay attention, do good, get great points, and have a good ride in the course, and get a good grade altogether. If you have any questions, you can certainly send them to me. If not, take care, everybody. See you later.